In this video, I'll show you how to make curved text as we make this cute logo in Affinity. Let's get started. To begin, I want to add a few circles to create the frame of this design. To make these circles, I'll go to our shape tools and I'll click on the little arrow to open up all of the shapes so that I can select the ellipse tool. To draw out these circles, I'm going to go to the very center of our document. If you don't see these snapping lines, make sure that snapping is turned on right up here. So once you find the center of your document, go ahead and hold Command or Control and Shift as you click and drag to make a perfect circle from the very center of the document. I'm going to repeat this a few times to make more circles. Then I'll just change the color of a couple of these circles. I'll select one of them, and then I'll hold Command or Control to select another. And I'll make both of these a darker gray color. So now you can see the frame of this design. In the very center, we're going to create a lemon design. And then we have a border. And then in this section, we're going to add our text. And then we have another border. I want these two borders to be similar in size. So while holding Command or Control and Shift, I'm just going to shrink down this one so that they're similar in size. With that set up, now we can add in our text. Whenever you make text on a path, you first need to create the path for the text to follow. You can do this with the pen tool or with the shape tools. In this case, I want the text to go around the circle, so I'm going to use the ellipse tool to make the path. First, I'm going to create a circle for the top text. So starting from the very center, I'll hold Command or Control and Shift as I click and drag out a circle like this. I'll place this on top of everything. And then to turn this circle into a text path, I'll select the Artistic Text tool, and then I'll hover over the top edge of the circle until the cursor changes to a T with a squiggle. I'll click once, and now we can type in whatever text we want. Now we can adjust this, so I'll triple click to select all of the text, and then I'll change the font in the context toolbar. I'll choose a bold font for this. And then we can adjust the font size right here. Okay, so here's a problem that you might run into. As I made the text larger, some of the text stayed where I wanted it, on the top edge of the circle, while some of it moved to the inside of the circle. We can adjust this using the little triangles on the edges. So I'll start with this green triangle. I'll click and drag on the lower one, and this just moves where the text begins. Now you can see all of the text fits in this area, but I only want the text to be in this top half section. I don't want it spilling out like this. So I'll move this triangle up so that it snaps to this edge. And you can see once again, the text goes to the inside because it can't all fit in this area. So I'm just going to make the text a bit smaller. Now you can see all of the text fits in this top section right here. To make sure it's centered, I'll go to the context toolbar and I'll change the alignment to center. And I think this looks really good. So now that we can see how the text sits in this circle, I want to make sure it's centered in this white section right here. So to make sure it's perfectly centered, I'm going to hold Command or Control and Shift as I click and drag to make this a little bit larger. Now it looks like it's better centered here because you can see this white space and this white space is even. As one last step to adjust the text, I want to change the spacing in between the letters. Because the text is on a curve, we may have a little bit too much spacing between our letters right now. So I'll click in our text, and now that the cursor is blinking, I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut. I'll hold Alt or Option, and then I'll use the arrow keys on my keyboard to bring the text a little bit closer together. You can even make the space a little closer together. And now you can see the spacing looks a bit better. So now you know how to make text on a path. I'll continue this design by making the lower text right here. Now for this text, I'm going to grab the ellipse tool, and I'll repeat the same step, holding Command or Control and Shift to make a circle. But this time, the text is going to sit inside of the circle. So I'll make this circle a bit larger. Then I'll grab the Artistic Text tool, and I'll hover inside of the circle, and I'll click to begin my text. I'll triple click to select all of the text, and then I'll change the font. And I'll change the font size. Then I want to make sure it's centered in this section. So once again, I'll hold Command or Control and Shift as I click and drag to move this inward. Now you can see these spaces are more even. Maybe I'll pull it out a little more. And I think that placement looks pretty good. I want this to be centered in this bottom section. So once again, I'm going to adjust these triangles. I'll move this one until it snaps with the left side, and I'll move this red triangle until it snaps to the right side. Now that those bounds are set, I'm just going to change the alignment to the center. And to finish this off, we can adjust the spacing between these letters. Since these letters are sitting inside of the circle, things are a little more squished. So this time, while holding Alt or Option, I'm just going to add some space between these letters. Okay, at this point, we're done with the text, so now we can add the other design elements. First, we can add a simple separator in between the top and bottom text. I'm just going to use the ellipse tool for this. So I'll click and drag while holding Shift to make a perfect circle. And then with the Move tool, I'll just move this in place. I think that's pretty good for placement. I'll duplicate this across by holding Command or Control and Shift, and then I'll click and drag it over. And then to make sure that they're lined up perfectly, I'll hold Shift to select both of these circles, and then I'll move them until they're centered in the document. If I center them perfectly, the circles sit a little closer to the bottom text, but if I place it right here, it looks like the space between the top text and the circle and the bottom text and the circle is a little more even. So I'm going to keep the circles a little above the center for this design. Okay, to finish things off, let's make the lemon in the center. To make the lemon, I'm going to go over to our shape tools, and this time I'll select the triangle tool. I'll click and drag while holding Shift to make a perfect triangle, and then I'll place it so that it's centered. And then I'll drag it down just a little below center. That will give us an empty space between each of these wedges of the lemon. And now, to make this look more like the wedge in a lemon, I'm going to convert this shape to curves up in the context toolbar. Then I'll go to the center bottom of this triangle, and I'll drag this downward to give this a bit of a curve shape. Okay, I think this wedge looks really nice. Now I want to duplicate this all the way around this circle. To do that, I'm going to grab the Move tool, and then I'll click on the gear icon, and I'll check on Enable Transform Origin. The transform origin is this little crosshair icon right here. You can move this wherever you want, and your shape will rotate around that point. So if I click and drag this to the very center of the document, you can see our triangle will rotate around that point. I'll hold Shift to bring it back to the very center. And then I'll press Command or Control J to duplicate this layer. Now with this duplicate copy, I'm just going to hold Shift and I'll rotate it 60 degrees. I'll lift up on my cursor now, and we can continue to duplicate this around with Command or Control J. This lemon looks so cute, but I do think this center area looks a little too sharp. I wish these pointy edges had a little bit more of a curve to them. Luckily, that's an easy fix. We just need to go to the Vector Studio. And then we need to select the Corner tool. With this tool selected, we can make each of these points into smoother corner shapes. But I want to make sure these are all changed the same amount. So over in the layers, I'll make sure the top triangle is selected, and then I'll hold Shift to select the bottom one. Then I'll click and drag to highlight all of these inner points, and I'll click and drag to move them all at the same time to give them a rounded tip. Okay, I think this looks really nice. I'll just go back to the Pixel Studio so that we can finish up this design. To quickly finish this, I'm just going to adjust all of the colors. So I'll do that really quick, selecting the layers and changing their colors. So as you can see, curved text is pretty easy. I think this turned out great. And if you enjoyed this video, I'll leave a link in the video description to my free Affinity course. In the course, you'll learn 10 simple steps to make any photo amazing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Affinity Revolution tutorial.